Hey, what's going on everyone? Evan and Tucker here from BattleHawk Armory, and we are here today to talk a little bit about suppressors and suppressor mounts. So once upon a time, suppressors usually came with some sort of mount built into the suppressor. So you were really kind of pigeonholed into using specifically that style of mount and that style of muzzle device. But nowadays, we see a ton of suppressors being sold as hub suppressors. So Tucker, what is hub?
So hub is just the industry standard for the actual dimensions in the rear of the cylinder, and that is going to be your 1.375 inch by 24 thread pitch, and that allows you to use a vast majority of muzzle devices across different suppressors.
So we get a lot of questions, right? I'm newer to suppressors, I don't really know what I want, I don't really know what I need. There are all these different options, so we're going to try to break things down a little bit as far as, now that we know that hub is just an industry standard thread pitch, most suppressors nowadays are coming as hub. So something like this Otter Creek Labs Infinity, it is a hub suppressor, so 1.375 thread pitch inside of the suppressor, but it actually does not include any mount. Well, it is compatible with a lot. We have most of them here on the table. What's the right mount for you? That depends, totally. A lot of people will go with something simply, direct thread. So pros and cons of direct thread, Tug.
Direct thread, biggest pro obviously, this is going to be your cheapest option. It's also your lightest and one of the smallest options. The headache is these mounts have to essentially be set on the rifle and the suppressor a certain way, which makes moving that suppressor from firearm to firearm much more difficult.
So generally with direct thread mounts, we see these going on a lot of hunting platforms or dedicated platforms like Tucker said. Now keep in mind, all of these mounts that we're going to talk about do need to be set into the suppressor semi-permanently. So what you'll want to do is you'll want to actually coat these threads either in a rock set or a ton of red Loctite. So some sort of a bonding agent to actually semi-permanently install this mount into your actual suppressor. So basically you can purchase this direct thread adapter. They're pretty affordable, somewhere between like $50 and $80 depending on your thread pitch and finish in the appropriate thread pitch. But if you're trying to jump a 30 caliber suppressor from 5.56 to 7.62 or 300 blackout or things like that where we have different thread pitch, realistically you're probably not going to want to go with something direct thread. So if you're going to dedicate a suppressor to an individual rifle, whether it's a hunting rifle or something different, you want to do it on the low end of the price point. You want it to be as small and as wide as possible. Perhaps a direct thread mount is the way to go. But we have tons of other options aside from something as simple as direct thread. We have tons of different taper mounts. So taper mounts are really cool. Tapers are pretty awesome. Made popular largely by Q with the Plan B system. So I don't actually have a Q Plan B here on the table, but a lot of these products are Q Plan B compatible. So we'll start off with Rearden Atlas. So this is a hub mount made by Rearden. It is Q Plan B compatible, and it simply operates on a single taper. So we have a Rearden muzzle device here. We can see there is a taper on the back side of this muzzle device. There's also a corresponding taper inside of the suppressor mount itself. So you'll install your Rearden Atlas into your hub compatible suppressor, again bonding it into that suppressor, and then to install it onto the muzzle device, you'll simply thread it on over the muzzle device. Very simple to do. And those two tapers are actually going to mate up, and when you fire your first shot, you'll get a carbon seal at that taper. So it's a very easy system to switch from firearm to firearm. You can buy these muzzle devices from tons of different manufacturers in tons of different designs, thread pitches, calibers, things like that. So this is going to make life a lot easier if you actually want to switch things around. Generally, what we're seeing is that people are wanting these taper mounts because they are a little bit lower profile, as you can see, versus some of the things over here. They also come at a lower price point because they're a little bit simpler. One of our personal favorites right now is the Diligent Defense Zilch. This is probably the lowest profile hub mount. And these Zilch mounts are actually Plan B compatible as well, just like the Rearden, just like the actual Q product. But you can see comparing the Zilch versus the Rearden, The taper is much farther forward into the actual suppressor on the Zilch. Now, caveat there, something to be aware of. Some suppressors, you can have some issues with clearance as far as where that muzzle device actually sits. So you may need to run the Diligent Defense muzzle device. As you can see, there is a bit of difference as far as how much is going to stick out beyond the suppressor and how much is going to sit in the suppressor. So maybe some clearance issues with this Zilch, but also still a really good option. Now, Dead Air also makes a single taper mount, and that is going to be the Xeno mount. So Xeno from Dead Air is also a single taper, relatively affordable system. All of these single taper mounts are going to be on the lower end of the price point, so somewhere around $100 or less. Very simple to use. Muzzle devices are also going to be a little bit less expensive as well. So single taper mount from Dead Air, that's going to be your Xeno system. You will find some suppressors from Dead Air that already come with Xeno as well. So if you like single taper, you want a Dead Air product, you can probably go ahead and pick up a suppressor with that system already on it. Huxworks also makes a single taper mount. That is going to be this HX muzzle device, again available in different calibers. The new hub mount that Huxworks is making is going to kind of be our segue into a locking mount. So this muzzle device is a single taper. Traditionally on Huxworks suppressors, it just bottomed out onto that actual muzzle device, and then you had your carbon and gas seal at that taper. The new Huxworks hub mount, the HX hub mount, is actually locking. So we now have a locking collar at the rear. Once we've installed our hub suppressor into the muzzle device, we'll just go ahead and twist this lock ring, and we have a positive retention system. Now, these positive retention systems do have some benefits. Sometimes they have secondary tapers, which we can kind of talk about as well, and added retention, obviously. So leading into these locking systems, probably the most popular dual retention system is going to be the Dead Air Chemo. So why don't you talk to us about Chemo real quick?
Industry standard hub, that 1.375 by 24 we talked about earlier, so you can run this on most suppressors out there, just like the Dead Air Xeno that Evan was mentioned. A lot of Dead Air cans are available with Chemo pre-installed. It's going to use one of theirs, or there's other manufacturers that do make the Chemo style system muzzle devices for that. So you're simply just going to put it on. It's only going to go on one way, so you just rotate the suppressor until that thing locks in place. You're going to twist that collar until it stops, and then you have a positive bond there with the tapers.
And Chemo is really popular because, again, you can get a lot of suppressors from Dead Air with Chemo already on it. Chemo is like M-LOK in a sense, in that it's an open pattern that a lot of different manufacturers can make. So we actually have muzzle devices like this Blackout Defense muzzle device that is Chemo compatible. Chemo also generally is a little bit longer of a muzzle device, so you'll find a lot of factory firearms that are pinned and welded coming with Chemo muzzle devices on them. So you can get that hub Chemo mount and then install it on your 14.5, 13.7, whatever that slightly shorter barrel that's pinned and welded is. Again, it is a dual taper mount, so we have a initial taper here towards the actual front end of this muzzle device. That is where your carbon seal is going to form. We have a secondary taper here back at the rear of the muzzle device that is going to aid in concentricity. We also have some locking flanges that the teeth on your actual hub mount are going to lock in behind. So they are dual taper, unlike a lot of the other stuff that we already talked about. Another really popular locking mount is going to be the Surefire system. So again, Surefire mounts, these come on a lot of shorter barrels, 13.7s, 14.5s, because they are a little bit longer. We have things like this War Comp, we have 3-prong flash hiders, we also have compensators that are pinned and welded on a lot of firearms. These Surefire hub mounts are a bit on the expensive side. However, they are a hub mount, so you can take your Otter Creek suppressor, you can take your B&T suppressor and actually install it on a Surefire muzzle device now. So if you have some of those pinned and welded firearms, you can get a Surefire mount. Now, since we're talking about Surefire mounts, this is a good moment to talk about material. This Surefire mount is made out of steel. There is also a B&T made Surefire hub mount made out of titanium. So a lot of these muzzle devices you can get in either steel or titanium. To me, I would tend to lean a little bit more towards a titanium mount. Suppressor, yeah, maybe you'll want a steel one, but in the actual mount, especially when we're talking about these locking mounts, they get pretty big and pretty heavy, so that's going to be the main difference. Moving back to that zilch that we've already talked about, you can see there's a pretty dramatic difference between a zilch mount and a Surefire mount. Obviously that comes at a weight cost as well. So now that we can actually get something like this B&T that is titanium, although we're not necessarily going to lose some of the length with this locking mount, we can kind of lose some of the weight because it's made out of titanium. We also have rugged muzzle devices. So the RUM, why don't you run us through the RUM here?
So again, from Rugged Suppressors, this is their mount, the Rugged Universal Mount, or RUM systems typically known. Again, it is a dual taper locking collar, industry standard hub like everything else, and essentially you can use it on any suppressor in conjunction with their muzzle devices. Again, simply threads in. One of the neat things I do like about the Rugged is once it's fully seated and you lock the collar, it does include a go, no-go gauge, so you know you've got that muzzle device and suppressor seated fully.
Yeah, and they are dual taper, so dual taper muzzle device, just like some of the ones that we've already covered. The other big difference as far as things that we've already talked about is cost. Pretty much every muzzle device on this table is somewhere around $100. Some of the single tapers are a little bit less, maybe 80-ish. Some of the Surefires, hey, maybe they're about 150. Rugged makes muzzle devices for their mounts that are as low as about $30. So you can get 3 and 4 packs of them for $100. So there's a lot of cost savings associated with some of the Rugged muzzle devices, which is really nice for some customers because you can end up sinking a lot of money into these. Now the mounts themselves, this one is titanium. They're available in steel as well. Mounts are a little bit on the more expensive side because again, they are a dual taper system with an actual locking collar. So a very positive retention system with 2 tapers, lots of different thread pitches, calibers, a little bit slower to actually install the suppressor onto the muzzle device as opposed to say chemo, because you do have to thread it on and then twist the locking collar manually. But again, a lot of cost savings associated with those muzzle devices if you're planning on doing multiple systems. So we do really like RUM as well. We also have ASR. So why don't you run us through ASR real quick, Tug?
So again, Silencer Co's ASR mount, vast majority, I believe it's the Bravo size, is industry standard hub for ASR. A myriad of muzzle devices, flash hiders, compensators, things like that. Again, industry standard. It is a single taper design with a locking collar, very similar to the other ones.
Yeah, so very similar to RUM, ASR, manufactured by Silencer Co. There are a couple other muzzle devices that you can get that are ASR, such as a Lantac Dragon, similar to chemo, but you'll thread your muzzle device all the way into the suppressor, twist your locking collar just like on the Rugged Universal mount. So we have some of the compatibility of the dead air system. We have some of the security of the Rugged system. So kind of an in-between option for you, Silencer Co. ASR. So really what we're kind of getting at here is no matter what suppressor you already have, no matter what muzzle device you already have, there is some variety of hub compatibility that you could look at a B&T suppressor, an Otter Creek suppressor, maybe even something totally different like a CAT suppressor or anything else out there. All of the suppressors nowadays are largely coming as hub compatible, so we can use any of these mounts, whichever one makes the most sense for you, whichever one you're comfortable with, whichever meets the needs of your firearm and your caliber, and try any of the suppressors out there. So suppressors are a lot of fun, and now that you can actually use these hub mounts and install anybody's suppressor on anybody's muzzle device, on anybody's firearm, there's a suppressor for every firearm. We hope this rundown kind of helped you understand what some of the pros and cons are of some of these different muzzle devices, how they work, and which one might be best for you. If you have any questions about any of these muzzle devices, if you have any questions about the hub system, go ahead and make sure you leave those in the comments below. We appreciate you guys watching. We'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.